Before we start on two-dimensional arrays, we're going to take a look at some nested loops, which is an algorithm that is used a lot when dealing with two-dimensional arrays. So first thing we want to do is start a console project called Nested Loops 01. So I'm going to go into Visual Studio here and File, New Project. And I want a console app, and we're going to call it, I'll put 2020 on the front. Okay, so here is our program shell. We're going to delete the first 3 lines here. We're also going to delete that comment at the bottom. But we're going to leave the read key in there so we can still see the output without the program terminating right away. Okay, now let's flip back over to our Word document, and let's add this program, this subprogram, to our main program. So I'm going to copy that. We're going to flip over to Visual Studio, and this is a separate function, so it needs to be outside of the main function but inside of the class. So we'll put it right there, and because this is a console program, we need static on the beginning here. So let's take a look at what the function does. It starts with j equal to 1, goes up to 5, and prints out hello. And nothing's going to happen unless we call it. So up here, let's call it greeting. And remember, you need the parentheses because we're calling a function. That's part of the syntax for a function. Now let's go ahead and run it. We should get the word hello printed out 5 times. And I'd like that to be a little bit bigger, so we're going to change the properties here. And we're going to go to our font and, let's see, 28. Let's click on OK. OK, and that's a little bit better. Okay, so that's that function. Now let's flip back over to Word here. And now we're going to add this to our main method. We're going to take that call to greeting, which we've already got. We're going to put in a loop that goes from 1 to 3. So what's going to happen here is we're going to call greeting 3 times, and we're going to print out hello 5 times every time we do. So we should get 15 occurrences of the word hello when we run this program, and we do. So in effect, what we've done here is we've put a loop inside of a loop. And when you do that, the body of the inner loop is considered one statement, greeting. And this will get done. And when we finish doing all of the iterations through that loop, then we exit the inner loop, we go to the outer loop, and we set I equal to the next number, which would be 2. And then we go and do the inner loop and print out hello 5 times, and then we exit, and we go to the outer loop, we increment I to 3, and we go to the inner loop and do 5 more times, and then finally I becomes greater than 3, and we exit the outer loop here. Now let's go back to our notes, and here's an important point. The syntax of loops says that the statement being repeated can be any other statement, including another loop. So you can put loops inside of loops. Okay, we're going to add a couple of instructions here, a couple of loops to our main program. Let's take this one, copy it, flip back over, and we're going to put that here. Okay. And then let's go back to Word, and we're going to take this, and we're going to copy it, and we're going to flip over to Visual Studio, and we're going to do that. Okay. I'm not calling greeting anymore, so we can kind of forget about that for right now. So what I've got here, I don't have a loop inside of a loop. I have a loop followed by a loop. So the body of this loop right here is just writing out I, and I is going to be 1 and a 2 and a 3. And the body of this loop down here is just going to print out J, which is a 4 and a 5. So this should give me 1, 2, 3, and this should give me 4 and 5. So let's go ahead and run that. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now let's take these loops and put them together. Okay. I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm going to put this, make it look a little better. We will delete the line here, and then we'll tab that over, we'll tab that over. So that shows the actual flow of control. So this is my outer loop. I will be set to 1, and then the inner loop will get executed. So J will go from 4 to 5. So print out a 4 and a 5. And then I will become 2, and then we'll execute the inner loop, and we'll print out a 4 and a 5 while I is 2. And then we'll set I to 3, and we'll print out the inner loop while I is 3. So it looks like it's going to print 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5. And I never gets printed out. I is just a counter that tells us how many times to execute the inner loop. So we should get 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5. If we run this, let's go ahead and run it. 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5. So the first two are the first iteration of the outer loop, and then the second iteration of the outer loop, and then the third iteration of the outer loop. Okay. Now let's change this to a J, or from a J to an I. And before you run this, you should try to figure out what the output is going to be. And so I would pause the video right now and see if you can figure out what's going to happen. So what's going to happen is I is going to be set to 1, and then we're going to do this loop. Basically, this loop gets executed twice. Once with a value of 4, and then a value of 5 for J, and we're going to print out I, which is still 1. So we're going to print out I twice. Then I becomes 2, and we're going to print out I twice. And then I becomes 3, and we're going to print out I twice. So we should get 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3 if we run this. So I hope that's what you predicted. Okay, now let's make the program a little bit more interesting. Instead of just writing out J down here, I'm going to write out I and J both. So I will be my first argument, then a comma, and then my next argument, and then close the quotation marks, and comma, and I, comma, J. So I is the first argument, or argument 0, and so it will go here. Argument 1 is going to be J, it'll go here, so they'll be printed out side by side. And again, before you try to run this, just pause for a minute and try to figure out what the output is going to be. Okay, let's check it out. So I is going to be 1, and then we're going to do the inner loop from 4 to 5. So we're going to get a 1 and a 4 and a 1 and a 5. Then we're going to go back and we're going to change I to 2, and then we're going to do the 4 and the 5 again. So we're going to get 2, 4, 2, 5, and then one more time I becomes 3, and we're going to do this loop, and we're going to get 3, 4, 3, 5. So let's go ahead and run it and see if that's what we get. So these two are the first time through the outer loop when I is 1, and then we do the inner loop and we get a 4 and a 5. Then we jump back out to the outer loop again and I becomes 2, and then we do the inner loop and we get a 4 and a 5. Then we jump to the outer loop again and I becomes 3, and then we go to the inner loop and we print out a 4 and a 5. Okay, let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's change the 4 to a variable, and the variable we're going to change it to is the only other one that we have, which is I. So now we're going to print out I and J repeatedly, and again, pause the video and take the time to figure out what the output's going to be, and then start up the video again. Okay, so what's going to happen here? Well, the outer loop is going to go from 1 to 3. So we know that the inner loop is going to get executed 3 times. And we're going to start off with J equal to 1, and we're going to go from 1 to 5. So I will be 1, and then J will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we're going to set I equal to 2, and then we go from 2 to 5. So we'll get a 2, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we fall out of the inner loop, we go back to the outer loop, I becomes 3, and J goes from 3 to 5, so we get 3, 4, 5. So it looks like we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. Let's go ahead and run the program. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 3, 4, 5. So I is 1 on all 5 of these iterations, and we start with 1 and go to 5. On the second time through the loop here, what we get is I is 2, and we go from 2 to 5. And on the last iteration through the loop here, we start with I is 3, and it remains 3 the whole time, and we go 3, 4, 5. And we can close that. Okay, let's make another change here. We will set I equal to a constant again. This time we'll make it 1 though. And up here we will stay in the loop as long as j is less than or equal to I. Okay? So again, pause the video, try and figure out what the output's going to be, and then start the video up again. Okay, let's look at what's going to happen. The outer loop, I is going to be 1 the first time, it's going to be 2 the second time, it's going to be 3 the second time, or the third time. So I is 1, and then j is going to go from 1 to 1. So print out a 1 and a 1. And then I is 2, and j will go from 1 to 2, so print out a 1 and a 2 for j. And then I is 3, and we'll go from 1, 2, 3 for j. So, so it looks like I is going to be 1, and then we'll go from 1 to 1. So just one pass through the loop, we'll print out 1, 1. And then I is 2, and we'll go from 1 to 2, so we'll print out 2, 1, 2, 2. And then I is 3, and we're going to go from 1 to 3. So we'll print out 3, 1, 3, 2, 3, 3. Okay, so we should get 6 lines of output here. Let's go ahead and run it. And this is I the first time, and we go from 1 to 1. And this is I the second time, and we go from 1 to 2 for j. And then we set I equal to 3, and we go from 1 to 2 to 3 for j. So this is what you get on the first pass through the outer loop. This is what you get on the second pass through the outer loop. And this is what you get on the third pass through the outer loop. Okay, let's add one more twist here. We will leave this the way it is. But what we will do here is we will just change our right line just to print out j. Okay, so we're going to forget about I. We're just going to print out j here. And we're going to do a right, though, instead of a right line. And if I run the program right now, then I'll get my output for j, which is going to be 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, all on the same line. Maybe I should put a little space in there. Okay, so that'll spread them out a little bit. But what I want to do is I want the output for this loop to be on one line. So when I is 1, I want to print out a line. When I is 2, I want to print out a line. And when I is 3, I want to print out a line. So every time when I get to the end of this second for loop here, I want to go to a new line. But not until I've printed out all the values of j. So one pass through the outer loop now, we'll take I from 1 to 2 to 3. So I is 1, I print out a 1 on the first line, and then I do a right line. Then I is 2, and I print out a 1 and a 2 on the same line, and then I do a right line, and then I is 3, and I print out a 1 and a 2 and a 3, and then I do a right line. So I'm going to get 3 lines of output out here. 1 number on the first line, 2 on the second, and 3 on the third. Let's go ahead and run that. And there you go. So if you want all the stuff in the inner loop to go on one line, use a right, and then after you fall out of the loop, note that this is outside of this inner loop, but it's inside of the outer loop's body. Put a right line down here.